The flight cabin was unusually quiet, the hum of the engines overshadowed by a tension that could be felt in the air. Kamala Harris sat in her seat calmly flipping through her notes for an upcoming summit on diversity and inclusion, when a sharp voice cut through the tranquility. "You can't sit there," the flight attendant said curtly, pointing at Kamala. Confused, Kamala looked at her assigned ticket and then back at the attendant. "I'm in the correct seat," she replied evenly, showing her ticket as she always had in countless flights. But the attendant's tone sharpened. "I don't care what your ticket says," she snapped. "We have rules about these seats." A murmur spread through the cabin. A young woman a few rows back sat frozen, her admiration for Kamala suddenly overshadowed by disbelief and fear. Her phone was in her hand, her instincts urging her to record the moment, but hesitation anchored her. Kamala remained composed, the weight of years of public scrutiny and grace under fire evident in her demeanor. "I'm asking for clarity," she said, her voice firm but devoid of anger. "If there's an issue with my ticket, I'm happy to resolve it." The attendant's response wasn't just dismissive, it was laced with a tone that carried deeper undertones. "People like you always think you can do whatever you want," she sneered. Gasps echoed from nearby passengers, and Kamala's expression tightened, not with anger but with an unmistakable resolve. "I'll have to ask you to explain what you mean by that," she said. Her tone carried the authority of someone who refused to let discrimination go unchecked. Still, silence lingered from most passengers. A few exchanged uneasy glances, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. The young admirer gripped her phone tightly, torn between fear of drawing attention to herself and the growing urge to stand in solidarity. What followed next was unexpected. A man in the aisle seat across from Kamala spoke up. "Excuse me, but I think we all deserve some respect here. This behavior isn't appropriate." His voice broke the dam of silence, emboldening others to murmur in agreement. The attendant faltered, her confidence shaken. Kamala, still seated, met her gaze directly. "It's important to treat everyone with dignity. I'll remain in my assigned seat unless there's a valid reason not to," she said, her voice calm yet resolute. The tension in the air began to ease, though the moment's weight lingered. The young woman who had hesitated to act felt a surge of courage, capturing the scene on her phone as her voice finally found its strength. "This isn't okay," she said softly but clearly. "We all see what's happening." Kamala glanced back, a faint smile of encouragement breaking through her composed exterior. It was a subtle acknowledgement, but it spoke volumes. The videos captured on passengers' phones hit the internet like wildfire. Within hours, the incident was trending across social media platforms. Hashtags like #StandWithKamala and #AirlineAccountability dominated timelines, sparking outrage and discussion. Clips of the flight attendant's remarks were replayed on every major news network, alongside images of Kamala Harris's calm yet resolute response. Public sentiment erupted. Supporters rallied behind her, citing the incident as a stark reminder that discrimination persisted even in the most public spaces. Others, emboldened by the visibility of the event, shared their own experiences of prejudice in everyday life. The airline released a carefully worded statement, apologizing for the misunderstanding and promising an internal investigation, but it only fueled the fire. Kamala, however, refrained from issuing immediate public remarks. Instead, she focused inward, reflecting on the weight of the moment. She knew that her silence could be misconstrued, yet her instincts told her that the response had to be measured, deliberate, and meaningful. When she finally broke her silence, it wasn't in a press conference or an interview but in an open letter addressed to the public. In it, she wrote about resilience in the face of prejudice and the importance of turning moments of adversity into opportunities for growth and systemic change. "This is not just about me," she wrote. "It's about the countless others who face discrimination without the privilege of a public platform to address it. We must do better, not just as individuals but as a society." The letter struck a chord. Celebrities, activists, and everyday individuals shared her words, amplifying the message far beyond what anyone anticipated. It wasn't just about holding one person accountable. It was about addressing the deeper, systemic issues that allowed such incidents to persist. Meanwhile, the airline scrambled to repair its image. Behind closed doors, executives reached out to Kamala, offering private apologies and pledging to implement changes. Kamala, however, insisted on meeting with the flight attendant directly. Her request was unorthodox, but her intent was clear. The meeting took place in a neutral setting, away from cameras and media attention. The flight attendant, visibly nervous and contrite, struggled to find the words to explain her behavior. "I made assumptions," she admitted after a long silence. "I was wrong." "There's no excuse." Kamala listened intently, her expression unreadable. "Assumptions can be dangerous," she finally said. "They can hurt people. But they can also teach us, if we're willing to learn." She didn't sugarcoat her words, but she didn't condemn the woman either. Instead, she suggested a path forward, one rooted in accountability and education. Her proposal for the airline included mandatory diversity training, community engagement initiatives, and an open platform for employees to share their experiences and learn from one another. "Change doesn't happen overnight," Kamala said. "But it starts with steps like these." The flight attendant, humbled and deeply affected by the conversation, agreed to participate in the initiative. For her, the incident became a turning point, sparking a personal journey of unlearning biases and advocating for inclusivity. Kamala's ability to lead with empathy, even in the face of prejudice, set the tone for what would come next. The ripple effect of that one moment grew into a wave of change. Advocacy groups partnered with the airline to develop comprehensive policies against discrimination, and other industries began taking note. Kamala's leadership transcended the immediate incident, transforming it into a catalyst for broader societal transformation. The advocacy movement that emerged in the aftermath of the incident grew rapidly, fueled by Kamala's leadership and the public's unwavering demand for accountability. Civil rights organizations collaborated with her to launch a groundbreaking initiative aimed at promoting diversity and inclusion in industries often plagued by systemic biases. Workshops, forums, and community outreach programs were rolled out, starting with the aviation industry. Employees, from flight attendants to executives, attended mandatory training sessions designed to address unconscious bias and foster empathy. Kamala insisted on being actively involved, not as a distant figurehead but as a hands-on leader. She hosted dialogues where employees shared their experiences, allowing real conversations to shape the movement's direction. One story stood out: a veteran flight attendant who admitted that the industry's fast pace often masked the need for personal growth. "We get so used to rules and routines that we forget the human side of our work," he said. Kamala responded with a simple but powerful reminder. "Every interaction is an opportunity to uplift or harm. The choice is always ours." Meanwhile, the young woman who had recorded the original incident found herself at the center of the movement. Encouraged by Kamala's mentorship, she stepped into a leadership role within the initiative. Her journey, from hesitance to advocacy, became a symbol of how individual actions could contribute to collective change. "I didn't speak up right away," she admitted during a panel discussion. "But when I did, it reminded me that my voice matters, and so does everyone else's." The campaign's impact extended far beyond the airline industry. Corporations in other sectors began adopting similar programs, driven by the growing cultural shift toward inclusivity. Testimonies poured in from individuals who had felt empowered by the movement. A teacher shared how her students were inspired to organize a diversity club at school, while a small business owner recounted revamping his hiring practices to prioritize equality. Kamala's message resonated deeply. Real change wasn't confined to policy, it thrived in everyday actions. She continued to amplify this vision, leveraging her platform to advocate for legislation that encouraged corporate accountability. "It's not enough to say the right things," she declared at a national summit. "We have to live them, every single day." As the initiative gained momentum, the cultural shift became undeniable. Media outlets highlighted stories of transformation, from workplaces embracing diversity to communities bridging divides. The airline, once a symbol of controversy, became a case study for how accountability, and collaboration could drive meaningful progress. Years later, the ripple effects of that fateful flight were still being felt. The young admirer, now a respected advocate in her own right, reflected on how Kamala's resilience had shaped her own path. "She showed me that leadership isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about facing them head-on, with courage and compassion," she said in an interview. Even the flight attendant who had sparked the controversy became a voice for change. In a candid moment during a diversity panel, she admitted, "That day changed everything for me. It forced me to confront my biases and take responsibility. Kamala didn't just hold me accountable, she gave me a chance to grow." Kamala, now regarded as a symbol of unwavering leadership, remained humble in the face of her influence. She often downplayed her role, emphasizing that the real heroes were the individuals who chose to embrace change, no matter how difficult. The legacy of the incident became a testament to the power of resilience, empathy, and advocacy. It was a story not just of one leader's response to prejudice, but of a collective transformation fueled by the belief that equality and inclusion were worth fighting for. In her final reflections on the movement, Kamala summarized it best. "This isn't the end of the story. It's only the beginning of what we can achieve together." The young woman who recorded the incident, now thrust into the spotlight, found herself overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Initially hesitant, she struggled with the idea of being a public figure, but Kamala reached out to her privately. In their conversation, Kamala offered words of encouragement, emphasizing the importance of her actions. "You didn't just capture a moment, you gave a voice to something bigger than all of us," Kamala said. That conversation became a turning point for the young woman, inspiring her to embrace the opportunity to create change. She soon joined the advocacy initiative, becoming a prominent voice for younger generations navigating discrimination and prejudice. Through her story, she connected with people who had previously felt invisible, empowering them to stand up for themselves and others. Her message was clear. We all have a role to play, no matter how small it might seem. Meanwhile, Kamala continued to expand the scope of the movement. She spearheaded a nationwide campaign promoting workplace equality, using her platform to bring together leaders from various industries. These forums became spaces for honest dialogue, where difficult conversations were encouraged. Kamala knew that change couldn't happen without discomfort, and was unafraid to challenge systemic norms head-on. One of the campaign's crowning achievements was the establishment of a mentorship program designed to uplift underrepresented individuals in corporate spaces. The program paired aspiring leaders with experienced professionals, fostering a culture of inclusion and growth. The results were transformative, not just for the ments, but for the mentors, who often found their own perspectives evolving through the process. The flight attendant at the center of the controversy, initially resistant to the idea of public accountability, slowly began to embrace the movement's values. After participating in diversity training and reflecting on her actions, she chose to share her story publicly. In a heartfelt speech during one of the initiative's events, she admitted, "I was wrong, and I let my biases dictate my actions. But I'm committed to learning and doing better, not just for myself but for everyone I interact with." Her vulnerability resonated with the audience, serving as a powerful example of how accountability could lead to redemption. Kamala's decision to approach the situation with empathy rather than condemnation had transformed what could have been a divisive moment into one of healing and growth. As the movement gained traction, tangible results began to surface. A major airline adopted the initiative's proposed policies, becoming the first to mandate annual diversity training for all employees. Other companies followed suit, inspired by the positive changes within the aviation industry. These changes weren't limited to policies. They extended to company culture, hiring practices, and even customer interactions. Kamala's advocacy reached a legislative level as well. She worked with lawmakers to draft a bill aimed at promoting workplace inclusivity across industries. When the bill passed, it was hailed as a historic victory for civil rights, marking a significant step toward equality. Kamala, however, remained grounded. "This isn't about me," she said during a press briefing. "It's about what we can accomplish when we choose to see each other as equals." Beyond the policy changes and public conversations, the most profound impact was felt on an individual level. Stories began to emerge from people inspired by the movement, teachers introducing inclusion workshops in their classrooms, managers rethinking their leadership styles, and communities finding ways to bridge cultural divides. Years later, the young admirer, now a respected leader in her own right, reflected on how that flight had changed her life. Kamala didn't just lead by example, she showed me that real leadership is about lifting others up, she said in a keynote speech. Her words, much like Kamala's actions, left a lasting impression on everyone who heard them. Kamala's own reflections on the movement were simple yet profound. In an interview marking the anniversary of the incident, she said, "What happened that day wasn't an isolated moment. It was a reminder that we all have work to do, every single one of us. Change doesn't happen in silence, and it doesn't happen overnight. But it does happen when we commit to it." The legacy of that day on the flight became more than a story of conflict and resolution. It became a symbol of resilience, leadership, and the transformative power of empathy. Kamala's approach, firm yet compassionate, direct yet understanding, set a standard for how humanity could confront its flaws and strive for a better future. The movement continued to grow, driven by the belief that moments of adversity could become opportunities for transformation. For Kamala, the incident was never about personal vindication. It was about sparking a cultural shift that inspired others to act, not out of fear or anger, but out of a shared commitment to equality and inclusion. As she often reminded those around her, "The work isn't finished. And that's why we keep going." The days following the incident saw a surge of voices across social media, each with its own story of encountering prejudice and discrimination in everyday life. Kamala Harris, aware of the importance of harnessing this moment, initiated a series of virtual town halls where people could openly share their experiences. These forums became spaces of vulnerability and solidarity, drawing attention to the systemic issues that often go unnoticed. Kamala herself moderated many of these discussions, listening intently and emphasizing the value of every voice. Her calm and empathetic leadership quickly became the cornerstone of a growing movement. The airline, pressured by mounting public scrutiny, announced a full review of its internal policies and a commitment to training programs that would address unconscious bias and promote cultural sensitivity. Kamala insisted on transparency throughout the process, ensuring that the promises made weren't just performative gestures but meaningful steps toward change. While the public rallied behind her, Kamala remained focused on the bigger picture. In one of her town halls, she spoke directly about the responsibility of those in leadership to not just react but to create proactive solutions. "Moments like this remind us that accountability isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity to grow," she said. Her words resonated deeply, sparking conversations about the role of organizations in fostering inclusive environments. Meanwhile, the young woman who had recorded the original confrontation began receiving messages of encouragement from people around the world. Inspired by Kamala's mentorship, she started sharing her own story more openly, recounting her internal struggle during the incident and her eventual decision to act. Her authenticity struck a chord, especially with younger audiences who saw her as a relatable figure navigating the complexities of standing up in a tense moment. This newfound role wasn't without its challenges. Critics questioned her motives, but she stayed resolute, guided by Kamala's advice to focus on the positive impact of her actions. Her journey from hesitance to empowerment became a vital part of the movement, demonstrating how ordinary individuals could rise to extraordinary circumstances. As the initiative expanded, Kamala proposed a groundbreaking cultural shift program, targeting industries beyond aviation. The program emphasized storytelling as a tool for building empathy, with employees encouraged to share their experiences of bias, resilience, and growth. These sessions were transformative, often revealing how much individuals had in common despite their differences. The flight attendant who had sparked the initial controversy became an unexpected advocate for the program. After attending multiple sessions, she began to understand the depth of her actions and their impact. In one emotional moment during a workshop, she shared how the incident had forced her to confront long-held biases. "I thought I knew better," she admitted. "But I wasn't listening. Now I want to do better, not just for myself, but for everyone I encounter." Her candor surprised many, including Kamala, who commended her willingness to embrace accountability and growth. The flight attendant's transformation became a powerful symbol of the movement's potential to effect real change, even in those who initially resisted it. At the same time, Kamala began advocating for legislative reforms that would hold industries accountable for promoting diversity and inclusion. Her proposed policies included incentives for companies that demonstrated measurable progress in these areas, as well as penalties for those that failed to comply. The initiative gained bipartisan support, thanks in part to Kamala's ability to frame it as a universal issue rather than a partisan one. As the legislation made its way through Congress, Kamala continued to emphasize the importance of grassroots efforts. She visited schools, community centers, and workplaces, engaging with people directly and encouraging them to be part of the solution. Her speeches were always grounded in empathy, urging individuals to look beyond their own experiences and consider the perspectives of others. The young admirer, now a prominent figure in the movement, took Kamala's message to heart. She launched her own campaign to create safe spaces in schools where students could discuss topics like diversity, prejudice, and inclusion. Her efforts led to the establishment of programs in dozens of schools nationwide, ensuring that future generations would grow up with a deeper understanding of these issues. As the movement reached new heights, Kamala reflected on its impact. In an interview marking the 2-year anniversary of the incident, she spoke about the power of resilience and the importance of choosing empathy over anger. "We can't change the past," she said, "but we can use it to guide us toward a better future." Her words encapsulated the essence of the movement, which had grown from a single moment into a global call for change. The airline, once synonymous with controversy, had become a leader in diversity and inclusion, thanks to its willingness to embrace accountability. Other industries followed suit, inspired by the tangible results of the initiative. Even years later, the legacy of that flight remained a touchstone for discussions about equality and inclusion. Kamala's leadership, the courage of the young woman who recorded the incident, and the transformation of the flight attendant all served as reminders of what could be achieved when people chose growth over division. In her final remarks on the movement, Kamala summed up the journey with characteristic humility. "This was never about one person or one moment," she said. "It's about the collective power we have to create a world where everyone feels seen, valued, and respected. And that's a legacy worth fighting for." The ripple effects of the incident extended further than anyone could have anticipated. Media outlets continued to dissect the event, but the narrative shifted from controversy to transformation. Kamala Harris became a symbol of grace under pressure, and her ability to turn adversity into opportunity resonated across communities. She began receiving invitations to speak at global forums, where she addressed the importance of resilience and the collective effort needed to dismantle systemic prejudice. At one such event, Kamala highlighted the power of advocacy in shaping cultural norms. "It's not enough to condemn discrimination when it happens," she said. "We must also examine the systems that allow it to persist and work together to dismantle them." Her words were met with resounding applause, cementing her role as a leader not just in politics, but in the broader fight for social justice. Behind the scenes, Kamala worked tirelessly to build bridges between diverse groups. She recognized that true change required collaboration, even with those who held opposing viewpoints. In one memorable meeting with industry executives, she stressed the importance of accountability without fostering animosity. "This isn't about blame," she said. "It's about responsibility and the shared goal of creating a fairer future." Her balanced approach won over skeptics and brought unlikely allies into the fold. One executive, initially resistant to change, later admitted, "Kamala's leadership made me realize that inclusivity isn't just a moral imperative, it's a necessity for growth and innovation." This sentiment became a cornerstone of the movement as industries began to adopt Kamala's vision of progress through collaboration. The young woman who recorded the incident also found her voice growing stronger. With Kamala's mentorship, she became a prominent advocate for equality, using her platform to amplify stories that often went unheard. Her speeches were candid and relatable, addressing the fears and doubts many people faced when confronting prejudice. "It's not about being perfect," she said during one address. "It's about showing up and doing what you can, even when it's uncomfortable." Her authenticity resonated with young audiences, sparking a wave of grassroots initiatives led by students and community leaders. Kamala often joined these efforts, emphasizing the importance of empowering the next generation. She created scholarship programs for young advocates and launched mentorship networks that connected aspiring leaders with seasoned professionals. These programs became a testament to her belief in the power of mentorship and growth. Meanwhile, the flight attendant at the center of the controversy took steps to make amends. After months of introspection and participation in diversity workshops, she began to understand the broader implications of her actions. She reached out to Kamala, seeking guidance on how to contribute positively to the movement. Kamala's response was measured but supportive. "Redemption isn't about erasing the past," she said. "It's about using it as a foundation for building a better future." The flight attendant soon became a vocal supporter of the airline's new inclusivity policies. She shared her story at employee training sessions, openly discussing her mistakes and the lessons she had learned. Her journey from defensiveness to advocacy became a powerful example of how accountability could lead to meaningful change. The airline itself underwent a transformation, spearheaded by a new leadership team committed to transparency and inclusivity. Under Kamala's guidance, the company implemented policies that prioritized diversity in hiring and promoted a culture of empathy. The airline's customer service ratings soared, and it became a case study in how organizations could turn crises into opportunities for growth. Kamala's legislative efforts also began to bear fruit. Her proposed Equality in Workplaces Act passed with bipartisan support, mandating regular diversity training and establishing oversight committees to ensure compliance. The law was hailed as a milestone for civil rights, but Kamala reminded everyone that it was just one step in a much larger journey. "Laws can set the framework," she said, "but it's the people who bring them to life." Her emphasis on grassroots action remained a central theme of the movement. Communities across the country organized workshops, town halls, and advocacy campaigns inspired by Kamala's leadership. Stories of transformation continued to emerge, from a rural school integrating cultural awareness programs to a Fortune 500 company revamping its leadership pipeline to include underrepresented voices. One particularly poignant story came from a single mother who had been inspired by the movement to speak up against discrimination in her workplace. "I used to think my voice didn't matter," she said in a letter to Kamala. "But your example showed me that even small actions can make a big difference." As the movement grew, so did its impact. Kamala's vision extended beyond the immediate goals of inclusivity and equality. She began advocating for a more holistic approach to leadership, one that prioritized empathy, resilience, and a commitment to justice. Her speeches often returned to the idea that true leadership wasn't about power but about service. The young admirer, now a seasoned advocate herself, reflected on how the incident had shaped her journey. In a conversation with Kamala, she said, "You taught me that even the darkest moments can lead to light if we're willing to face them with courage." Kamala smiled and replied, "And you taught me that the next generation is ready to lead." The movement's legacy became a testament to the power of collective action. It wasn't just a story of one incident or one leader, it was a story of transformation fueled by the belief that a better world was possible. Kamala's resilience, the young woman's courage, and the flight attendant's redemption all served as reminders of what could be achieved when people chose empathy over division. As the years passed, the ripple effects of that moment on the flight continued to inspire change. Kamala's leadership remained a beacon, reminding people everywhere that the fight for equality wasn't just a battle, it was a journey. And on that journey, every step, no matter how small, brought the world closer to the ideals of inclusion and justice. The movement sparked by Kamala Harris's leadership quickly evolved into a powerful force for change, influencing not just industries but entire societal structures. As the momentum grew, so did the calls for more comprehensive action. Kamala's focus on accountability became a central tenet of the initiative, as she pushed for tangible measures that would ensure lasting progress. In a series of interviews, she made it clear that words alone weren't enough. Accountability means more than apologies. It means measurable outcomes and sustained effort, she said. Her call to action was met with overwhelming support, as organizations across sectors began to assess their practices and identify areas for improvement. The public's response to the initiative was heartening. Grassroots movements that had been operating quietly for years found a new sense of unity and purpose. Communities of color, often marginalized in these discussions, found their voices amplified as a result of Kamala's leadership. One organization, dedicated to empowering Black women in the workforce, reported a dramatic increase in membership after aligning its mission with the movement. Its leaders attributed the surge in interest to Kamala's ability to make the fight for equality not just relevant but urgent. "She gave us the courage to raise our voices," one advocate said. "We've been fighting for this for decades, but now it feels like the world is finally listening." While the initiative gained traction, it also faced resistance from some quarters. Certain voices in the media and politics dismissed it as a temporary trend, arguing that it lacked the depth to bring about meaningful change. Kamala's response was unwavering. "This isn't a trend," she declared in one of her most impassioned speeches. "This is a movement, and movements change the world." Despite the challenges, her resolve only strengthened, and she leaned into the resistance as an opportunity to further solidify the importance of the cause. One of the movement's core principles was empathy, and Kamala worked tirelessly to instill this value across sectors. In a series of educational forums, she invited individuals who had once been part of the problem, people who had perpetuated biases in their workplaces, to engage in candid discussions about their past actions. These sessions, uncomfortable as they were, proved invaluable in shifting the cultural mindset. "We can't move forward if we're afraid to confront the truth," Kamala often said. And as more people began to reflect on their own behaviors, it became clear that the process of self-examination was one of the most powerful tools for fostering long-term change. The young woman who had recorded the initial incident continued to rise as a prominent figure in the movement. Her personal evolution mirrored the transformation of the campaign itself. Once uncertain about her role, she had become an advocate, traveling across the country to speak at universities, schools, and community centers. Her message resonated deeply with young people who had previously felt disempowered by the system. "I'm here because I believe in the power of my voice," she often said. "I'm not an activist by title, but I'm an activist by action." Her words inspired countless others to take a stand in their own lives, whether through small acts of kindness or by challenging injustice when they saw it. In one particularly moving moment, she was invited to speak at a high school where students had organized a diversity panel in the wake of the movement's success. The students were nervous but determined, and the young woman's address left an indelible mark on them. "We are the future," she told them. "And we don't have to wait for the world to change. We can change it ourselves." The audience erupted in applause, marking the beginning of a new wave of young leaders committed to carrying the movement forward. The flight attendant, once at the center of the controversy, had undergone a profound transformation of her own. After a year of participating in training, she emerged as one of the movement's most unexpected yet powerful voices. She openly acknowledged her past mistakes and spoke about the importance of owning one's biases. "I was part of the problem," she admitted during one of the movement's largest forums. "But I'm here today because I want to be part of the solution." Her honesty was met with tears and cheers, and many in the audience found her willingness to change deeply moving. Her journey from shame to redemption underscored the movement's core message: change is possible, even for those who initially resist it. Kamala, always humble in her approach, used her platform to lift others up rather than to claim credit for the success of the movement. She spoke about the importance of collective action and how each individual had a role to play in the larger fight for justice. "This isn't just about what I've done," she said during a televised interview. "It's about what we all can do together. Every person who stands up, every person who speaks out, makes a difference." Her focus on collective action galvanized communities to continue pushing for change, even when progress seemed slow. The movement's impact began to be reflected in concrete results. Corporations, once resistant to change, now embrace diversity as a key factor in their growth. One major tech company, which had previously struggled with a lack of diversity in its leadership, announced a comprehensive plan to overhaul its hiring practices. The plan included mentorship programs for underrepresented groups, as well as leadership training aimed at dismantling the biases that had shaped the company's culture for decades. The CEO, once skeptical of such initiatives, publicly thanked Kamala for inspiring them to take action. "Without her leadership, we wouldn't have had the courage to make these changes," he said. The airline, which had been the epicenter of the controversy, became a beacon of progress. Its policies on diversity, inclusion, and employee accountability were hailed as best practices in the industry. Kamala's direct involvement in reshaping the company's culture ensured that the changes were not just superficial but ingrained at every level of the organization. As a result, employee satisfaction and customer trust soared, proving that when companies prioritized inclusivity, everyone benefited. As the movement continued to grow, Kamala's influence spread internationally. She became a sought-after speaker at global summits, where she shared her vision for a world where equality and empathy were central to every conversation. Her message was clear: no matter how entrenched the systems of prejudice may seem, they could be overcome with resilience, determination, and collective action. Reflecting on the movement's journey, Kamala said, "We are standing on the shoulders of those who fought before us. And we must continue their work, not just for ourselves but for future generations." Her words served as a call to action, inspiring countless individuals to continue pushing for the cultural shift that had begun with a single, courageous moment. The legacy of the movement was not just about policies or laws, but about the ongoing fight to ensure that every person, regardless of their background, could stand tall in a world that valued them equally. The movement's continued growth was a testament to its widespread resonance. As Kamala Harris's vision expanded beyond the initial scope, a critical mass of both ordinary citizens and influential leaders became involved in the fight for social justice. Kamala was clear in her approach: this was not a momentary effort, but a sustained, transformative process. "Change doesn't come overnight, but it comes if we keep moving toward it," she asserted in one of her most memorable speeches. Her determination became contagious, as thousands began to organize local events, discuss policy changes, and challenge ingrained biases in their workplaces and communities. Her unwavering commitment to holding systems accountable also meant confronting uncomfortable truths about how deep-seated discrimination could manifest in everyday interactions. In a press conference that garnered international attention, Kamala spoke about the need for continuous self-reflection. "We all have biases. The question is whether we will choose to confront them and change." The message struck a nerve, prompting both supporters and critics to reevaluate their roles in the larger conversation about inclusivity and diversity. One of the most striking developments during this period was the increasing visibility of previously overlooked communities. Groups that had long been silenced or marginalized in mainstream dialogues found a platform through Kamala's initiative. In communities that had experienced generations of exclusion, people began sharing their stories of hardship and resilience, connecting across racial, gender, and socioeconomic lines. The growing sense of solidarity and shared experience became one of the movement's driving forces. As one young advocate put it, "We're no longer just talking about change. We're actively making it happen." As the discussions surrounding systemic inequity gained more traction, the role of education became central to Kamala's strategy. She strongly advocated for the integration of anti-racism and diversity training into school curriculums across the nation. "Our children need to learn the truth early on, so they can become leaders of a more inclusive future," she stated during a televised address. These efforts were met with widespread support, particularly among educators who saw the value in shaping the next generation with empathy, understanding, and a strong foundation in social justice. Schools that adopted these programs saw a marked increase in student engagement and a decrease in incidents of discrimination, signaling the positive impact of early education on creating a more inclusive society. The young woman who had originally recorded the incident found herself thrust into the spotlight as one of the movement's most compelling figures. Initially uncertain about the impact of her actions, she quickly realized the magnitude of what she had started. Her role evolved from simply sharing her experience to becoming an active advocate for policy reform. "I never thought a moment could change everything," she shared during a speech at a national conference. "But it has, and I'm not stopping now." The movement's success gave her the courage to pursue a future in activism, and she began speaking out on issues beyond the original event, such as criminal justice reform and affordable healthcare, further amplifying the interconnectedness of various social issues. Kamala's mentorship of the young woman, as well as countless others, solidified the idea that leadership was not about elevating one person but empowering a collective of voices. Through mentorship programs and strategic partnerships, Kamala facilitated the growth of future leaders who would continue to carry the mantle of justice and equality. These efforts included opportunities for leadership development, internships, and scholarships aimed at underrepresented individuals seeking careers in public service and advocacy. The next generation of activists, inspired by Kamala's example, began to emerge, each bringing unique perspectives and innovative solutions to the table. In parallel, the flight attendant who had sparked the controversy embarked on a path of personal growth. She had taken full accountability for her actions, something that resonated deeply with Kamala, who had long believed that change was impossible without the willingness to face one's past mistakes. "I was wrong, and I've spent the last year working on making things right," the flight attendant said during a public panel discussion about workplace diversity. Her transformation was a powerful example of the movement's capacity to inspire self-reflection and redemption, showing that even those who had perpetuated harmful behavior could become agents of change. Her story was now one of growth and advocacy, as she worked with the airline to develop training programs designed to prevent discrimination and bias in the future. The airline, under Kamala's encouragement, became a model of accountability. New policies were implemented, including a zero-tolerance stance toward any form of discrimination and a commitment to diversity in hiring practices. The company also began collaborating with Kamala's team to introduce industry-wide standards for inclusivity and cultural competency. Employees were offered ongoing workshops on cultural awareness, and management was held to higher standards of inclusivity, with performance evaluations now including metrics related to diversity and inclusion. As a result, customer satisfaction improved, and the airline began receiving recognition for its progressive stance on diversity, attracting a new generation of loyal customers who valued corporate responsibility. Kamala's influence spread beyond the corporate world into political arenas, where she continued to push for legislation aimed at dismantling systemic inequities. Her proposed laws, including the Equal Opportunity Act, focused on expanding access to education, healthcare, and employment for marginalized communities. These policies emphasize not just the removal of discriminatory barriers but the active creation of opportunities for underrepresented groups to thrive. The laws were met with significant resistance in some quarters, but Kamala's unyielding determination carried them through the legislative process. "This isn't just about creating a level playing field," she said during a floor speech in Congress. "It's about ensuring that every individual has the resources they need to succeed." One of the most significant pieces of legislation was the Equality in Workplaces Act, which introduced mandatory diversity training in all federally funded organizations and implemented strict penalties for discriminatory practices. The bill passed with broad support, marking a major victory for Kamala and for those who had fought tirelessly for change. The passage of the bill was heralded as a turning point in the struggle for workplace equality, as it set a national standard for how companies were expected to treat employees of all backgrounds. As the movement gained international attention, Kamala began to influence global conversations about diversity and inclusion. She was invited to speak at international summits and forums, where her message of unity and collective action resonated with audiences from every corner of the world. During one of her speeches in Europe, she remarked, "The fight for equality is not confined to one country, one culture, or one race. It is a global movement, and we are all connected in the struggle for justice." Her words sparked a wave of solidarity, with organizations around the world adopting similar initiatives to promote inclusivity and challenge discrimination. Reflecting on the journey of the past several years, Kamala took pride not in her individual achievements, but in the lasting impact the movement had created. The cultural shift she had worked so hard to nurture was now a tangible reality, evident in the policies, the people, and the communities that had been transformed. "This was never about one person or one moment," she said during her final address on the anniversary of the original incident. "It was about all of us, coming together, choosing to fight for a world where equality is not just an ideal, but a lived reality." The movement's legacy would continue, sustained by the collective action of those who believed in the power of empathy, leadership, and the unwavering pursuit of justice.